And we have a Fox News alert. President Trump is back at the White House after wrapping up his trip to France for the G7 summit, where he signed a memo of understanding with Iran.
But the commander-in-chief says the military option is still on the table if Tehran breaks the terms.
Our chief foreign correspondent, Trey Yingst, is live in Tel Aviv with the details. Hey, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Overnight, President Trump signed the memorandum of understanding, formally marking the extension of the ceasefire with Iran. He was joined by French President Emmanuel Macron and Secretary of State Rubio, among others. We know on the Iranian side, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian was responsible for signing the document in the capital of Tehran. Earlier in the day, the president talked about this agreement, what it means, and what happens if it isn't enforced.
It's a memorandum of understanding. If it doesn't get done in 60 days, that's all right. We go back to bombing. You know, I don't want to do that because it's so good. But we might have to because we're never going to let them have a nuclear weapon. But they've agreed not to, and you'll see that very clearly in the agreement. We're not putting up money. Only if they're doing things right. If they're doing things right, if people want to invest, they can invest.
On Wednesday, a U.S. official read the agreement to reporters. Within the deal includes an immediate end to hostilities across the region, including in Lebanon. The final deal must be reached within 60 days, with the possibility of an extension. This is related to Iran's nuclear program and the details that are yet to be discussed. The U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports will end, the Strait of Hormuz will open, and the Iranians will receive tiered sanctions relief based on their performance and their agreements with the United States. Now, on the issue of negotiations, Iran's Parliament Speaker Mohammad Khalibaf, their top negotiator, said this.
The difference between the negotiations now and the previous periods is that today the flag of victory is in the field, which both enemies and friends have admitted. Our people saw the glory of the armed forces too, even though they were against the well-equipped enemy.
This is really a wait-and-see moment. The world is waiting to see if the Iranians will adhere to the agreement and if they are serious about these nuclear concessions as it relates to their program. Now, more broadly, the region is prepared for the possibility that this deal collapses. But at this moment, the president is touting the diplomatic success and what it will mean for the stock market and the oil market. Guys?
So right now, Trey, if you look at it, I think the biggest surprise for me is that they're able to sell oil today on the market for market rates, that the fact banking services restrictions have been lifted, insurance needed to facilitate these sales is now intact. So they no longer need a ghost ship to deliver oil without transponders to China. They get full freight for it. So I worry about that money coming in, not going to the Iranian people who need it so bad, who can't even get water and can't keep the lights on. It seems to go right to Hezbollah. And as you know, Reuters is reporting about an hour ago that Hezbollah was informed that Iran says we'll be giving you money, funds almost immediately.
Yeah, and look, this is where U.S. intelligence is going to come in to see where they're actually sending this money after they get it. We've already seen reports of vessels leaving Iranian ports with crude oil on board. Things are moving very rapidly in the region, and also more traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. There is this issue of mines, but it does appear that many of these vessels are adhering to basically the instructions from the U.S. Navy when they're supposed to leave, because there is still coordination on the ground. As for the Iranians, it's not just that sanctions relief, but it's the ability to sell crude oil. This is their main export and the way that they keep their economy running. And so for the Iranians, they're going to focus on the economic success as part of this deal. Again, the president has indicated that in the future, if they're not willing to make these good faith concessions, or if they don't adhere to this memorandum of understanding, not only would he choke off the sanctions relief, but also possibly use military pressure. There's this broader question of this $300 billion Reconstruction Fund, and I want to just read you the text of the agreement. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian, just about 20 minutes ago, posted the document on X, and it says, this is point number 6, the United States of America undertakes with regional partners to develop a definitive mutually agreed plan with at least $300 billion for the reconstruction and economic development of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The mechanism of the implementation of this plan will be finalized as part of the final deal within 60 days. So again, there's a lot to be worked out here, and I think it's very important to look at this agreement at face value. Many of the details aren't included, especially as it relates to Iran's ballistic missile program, the support of regional proxies. But again, this is a memorandum of understanding. It is not the final deal with the Iranian regime. And the president was clear, if they don't make these concessions as it relates to the nuclear program and their behavior across the region, then there will be consequences for the regime in Tehran.
Yes, and he said, as far as nuclear weapons, all hell will rain down if they pursue a nuclear weapon. And then he talked about if Iran doesn't comply, we'll go back to shooting at them, dropping bombs on their head. The Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, said something similar. Listen to this.
The War Department is here and prepared to restart if we need to. We prefer not to, but we are prepared and postured to. When the blockade opens fully, we'll step back and allow commerce to flow. But if Iran doesn't comply, then we're more than able to reimpose an ironclad blockade.
Trey, bottom line is Iran will never have a nuke. The Strait will be open, and we've already seen gas prices go down.
Yeah. And look, it's one thing to sign a deal. It's another thing to implement a deal. And that is why these statements from the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and from President Trump himself are very important, because they're talking about the consequences for the Iranian regime if they don't adhere to the framework that was signed last night in France, but also entering into these detailed discussions. Because, again, that's where a lot of these details are going to be worked out at the negotiating table. We're told by regional diplomats that the Qataris are immediately playing a role in actually scheduling these detailed discussions, because we're looking at a 2-month window, and there will still be U.S. forces in the region. Now, it's certainly much more difficult to return to a state of war, but the indication here is that the president isn't going to completely draw down U.S. forces to where they were before Operation Epic Fury unless he's seeing those concessions as it relates to Iran's nuclear program and destabilizing activity. And so a lot of people are jumping to conclusions about the agreement here. But again, we have to look at the facts here and what is written on the pages of this agreement, just about a page and a half. This is a memorandum of understanding. It is a 60-day extension of the ceasefire that was reached before with the Iranian regime, that both sides are agreeing to enter into detailed negotiations about Iran's nuclear program. We don't have the answers. We don't have a crystal ball about what these negotiations will actually yield. But again, the president and the Secretary of War have indicated that if the Iranians don't make these concessions, or if they continue destabilizing activity, there will be both economic and military consequences.
Wow,
real quickly, Trey, obviously Israel has been sidelined in this memorandum of understanding. What are you hearing from your sources about how they're viewing all of this right now?
Yeah, so the Israelis say they're going to continue operating defensively against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon if this Iran-backed group fires rockets or drones into northern Israel. Just yesterday, they conducted another airstrike in southern Lebanon, and as we speak, ground forces remain in this Hezbollah territory over the border between Israel and Lebanon. Now, this is a very important point here, and it's something to watch over these next 60 days, because this is never clean. Ceasefire deals are never simple, and this one is not going to be simple either. The Iranians have said in recent days, from the foreign minister to top IRGC officials, that if the Israelis strike Hezbollah in Lebanon, it would be a violation of the memorandum of understanding. And so this is something to watch, because if they're not getting what they want at the negotiating table as it relates to their nuclear program, they may try to tie, once again, the situation between Israel and Hezbollah to this broader agreement. And it will be the role of American negotiators and also of these intermediaries from Qatar to Pakistan to keep the Iranians on track, to A, ensure that they're not continuing to fund Hezbollah, to B, ensure that they're not ordering attacks on Israel, and to C, use the leverage they have against their largest proxy in the region to keep things calm between Israeli forces and Hezbollah forces in southern Lebanon. It's an X factor here. We don't know how it's going to play out, but the next 2 months will be critical to watch, because this is one front that is expected to continue. Israeli officials, from the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the Defense Minister Israel Katz, say they will continue to operate against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon.
Of course, Trey, thanks so much. Hezbollah exists to attack Iran. Right. That's basically it. And then spread their terror. They're hated by everybody.
You mean Israel, to attack Israel?
To Israel. And so that's why they exist. And that's not going to stop. And Israel's never going to not protect themselves. And if they start weaponizing it, they'll take things onto them.
Well, I mean, I think that it's like Trey said, we have to be optimistic. We have 60 days where the president can change things. And he even said yesterday, he said, I'm going to read the full deal word for word. And I want the public to learn the details directly from me, meaning other people are negotiating this. But now I have 2 months to change things if I want to. Also, oil prices are going down. I think he's worried about the economy. He says this could be a disaster if we don't fix this now. And we're, you know, the midterms are right around the corner.
Yeah, and President Trump is always a realist, a political realist, and he recognizes that you've got an election coming up. Iran very much had their only strong hand in this entire thing was the fact that President Trump, Republicans face elections this November that are going to be very difficult. For the second midterm election for the party in power in the White House is usually absolutely devastating. And President Trump recognizes that. And so we talk about Iran, their ability to tap along people that they're negotiating with. Well, you know, who's tapping whom along at this point? You know, as soon as, you know, if Trump gets past the election, if his party does well, if the economy holds strong, then Donald Trump will, on November 6th, wake up and have all the cards, and Iran has none of the cards. And so I have a lot of faith that you know, President Trump is going to make sure that the nuclear issue goes the way that he wants, which is the whole reason for this. And then the second thing being the proxies. If he is able to win on the proxy issue.
He didn't put it on the table. And this is J.D. Vance's deal. It's really not the president's. J.D. Vance led the negotiations, and it was well known the vice president was not for military action. So we'll see, because this is J.D. is kind of auditioning to be president of the United States. Here's what Donald Trump said about this deal and what happens next.
So the one thing I didn't want to see is economic catastrophe. If you kept this going, that could have happened. But all I know is every time we talked about the possibility of peace, the stock market shot up like a rocket ship. It never went down. They didn't like it. The people, you know, the stock market is more brilliant than anybody there is, including the people on the stage, other than me, of course. Let's see. I don't know. What do you think, Scott? Is the stock market more brilliant than you?
No, sir.
Scott Bessent's the best. I love Scott Bessent's idea. I want those frozen funds that Iran has. They're going to rebuild the bases, any damage they did when you rocketed them in Bahrain, Qatar, as well as the UAE.
And they insist that none of that money is U.S. money, which is significant.
You mean the $300 billion?
$300 billion.
Yeah.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.